like, this is so good. We're jumping right into the boogeyman, the things that scare us. And I love it because you're actually saying that a lot of the things that scare us are all related.
Totally all related. And one of the things you see all the time, which you rightly wanted to chat about, was cortisol.
I do, because I, it's also one of those very like open-ended terms. And I think I tend to think of it negatively. In fact, a lot of what I've even said to clients in the course of the day is like, I'm here, in the same way that we've talked, before about hacks, how we have coffee hacks or ways we connect to each other. I'm like, how many things have you done today to release cortisol, to empty the cortisol out of your body? So I sort of see it as, I see it more that way, but I know that there's probably a need for cortisol too. So maybe you could kind of like in your way, just sort of explain maybe why we don't want it in our bodies, and then maybe the positives, why it can actually be beneficial.
So, and it's such a great question. And actually it's like, we need cortisol. So there's never a time where we want no cortisol, and it's not possible to not have cortisol. Like, we would die without it.
Really?
So absolutely. It's like
crazy.
Our bodies, it's like everything: cortisol, insulin, glucose, ketones, estrogen, progesterone at different levels, like we would die if we didn't have, or would be severely impacted if we didn't have the natural fluctuations in these hormones to support our circadian rhythm. And cortisol often gets a bad rap because people talk about, it's like you see the words cortisol spike and this red flag comes up, or this fire comes up, or it's like, you get this really emotional sort of like, oh my God, that's like detrimental to muscle mass. It's detrimental to our brain. It's literally
increases
breaking down.
Like it helps, with weight gain, and you name it. We're like, that's what we.
Yeah, and we want to avoid that at all costs. But without cortisol, we wouldn't even be alive. And in fact, if people don't have cortisol, they have something, I believe, called Addison's disease. And it is when their body can't produce cortisol, the pituitary gland doesn't make it, or it's some sort of, I want to say, I don't think it's a genetic thing because it can happen over time, but I believe some people would genetically be more predisposed to it. But it is like when your cortisol's absolutely tanked, and medically you need help getting, you need help resolving that situation. So cortisol, it's a steroid hormone, much like our sex hormones, produced by the adrenal glands. It's often called the stress hormone because it is released in response to physical or psychological stress. That's via the action of something called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. And the thing with cortisol, it regulates metabolism. So it increases blood glucose via something called gluconeogenesis, which is the converting of our stored muscle glycogen carbohydrate into glucose. And it helps the body use fat, protein, and carbohydrates effectively for energy. It prepares the body for fight or flight by increasing the energy we have available. So if you think about it from a prehistoric perspective, like there were times where like food was scarce, and we would literally be either fighting for our life, running away from predators, or we would be trying to hunt down our food. And we'd need that energy to be in our system to give us that energy. The thing is, and so that is that fight or flight response. But nowadays, we aren't either fighting for our life or running for our life. We are, we're stuck in traffic, and it's creating stress. A whole host of other reasons for stress, but the body responds the same because the blueprint hasn't changed. And cortisol does have a rhythm where it's a thing that gets us up in the morning. We have a cortisol awakening response, which after 30 minutes, it should be at its highest peak. And then it does peak and trough naturally across the day, and sort of bottoming out at the end of the day, whereby when we're preparing for sleep, when our sleep pressure has, where we're just at this point where we're ready to go to sleep. So cortisol and melatonin work in opposition to each other. So when cortisol is low, melatonin is high. Equally, if you do have dysregulated cortisol and it's high, melatonin production is suppressed. And it has anti-inflammatory effects in the short term. It is, in fact, an anti-inflammatory hormone.
I feel like, as usual, my mind is like blown because when I first asked this question, I did not think, I thought there would be a litany of all the reasons why it was negative, right? And there would be a few things as to why it would be helpful, right, to
Yeah,
your body. The way that you're communicating it, it's almost like the reverse. Like there's a whole
totally.
lot more because that is, and at all great things. Why is it marketed? And I'll say marketing because I feel like so much of the way that we are receiving information about nutrition and science backed things feels very marketed, right?
Yeah.
So why is it kind of marketed like not is something that we want to kind of like shy away from or something like that?
It's because everything that I'm describing is a natural fluctuations and natural um, uh, cortisol response to different things throughout the day that actually allows us to live.
Mm.
Whereas what we hear is really related to chronic elevations in cortisol. And that's where the issue lies. It's like
Mm.
inflammation.
I
Inflammation
see.
is necessary for life.
Sure.
We need inflammation.
Sure.
It helps us adapt. It helps us adapt to
Sure.
exercise. It helps us with our immune system response, much like cortisol. But it's if you get a chronic elevation in cortisol and it doesn't now then reduce down to these healthy baseline levels, you start getting a disruption in other hormones. For example, cortisol and progesterone are both made from the same raw substrate or material in
Mm-hmm.
our body. So if you are always stressed all of the time and relying on cortisol, progesterone tanks because there's now no longer the substrate available to produce progesterone. So a lot of women have like bottomed out progesterone because they are stressed all of the time.
Mm.
And when we
That's
don't,
interesting.
yeah. And so when we force our body to be in a stressed state, just the way that we live, the lack of sleep that we might get, overtraining would do it, constantly under eating would do it.
Mm.
All of these things place a stress on the body that, if it isn't alleviated, will result in that chronic cortisol elevation. And that's when your body starts responding in the way that you describe, like you'll start storing fat around the middle. Like it's the easiest place to store fat through that constant elevation of cortisol.
So that's
You
really the main that's the key right there is it's not cortisol like
no,
itself. It's
mm-mm,
it's it's the it's and it's not the like intermittentness of it. It's
no,
really the constant elevatedness of it is where it's
yeah.
dangerous. That's a really good differential because I don't think I understood it until now. That's what people are explaining. So hopefully this is all nice and clarifying for lots of people that were a little confused about cortisol because there's a lot of
I think a
cortisol
lot of people
confusion.
are.
I think I
Yes,
know they are. Like I think the
yes,
beautiful thing is that I am like the majority of the
mm,
population is that you're trying to make sense of it. But I think simply stated, it's when you are in a chronic state of high levels of cortisol and there's no place to release. It's not intermittent. It's just constant. So your body
yeah.
is just it's going to burn out literally, right?
Um, uh, for some people, yes.
What would be the most like what are the most common, you said obviously gaining fat around the middle, but what are
Yeah.
the most constant or sorry, like, you know, common, not constant, common high level cortisol responses? Like if you're in a state of high cortisol, what are like your typical, symptoms of that?
So you'd feel really like tired but wired. So
Okay.
even though you feel exhausted, your mind is racing and you can't relax. Weight gain, as you mentioned, sleep issues, so trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, anxiety, irritability, overwhelm,
Yep.
a frequent illness because you've got a suppressed immune system because of cortisol's role in the immune system, high blood pressure, cravings for sugar or salty food, irregular periods or low libido, muscle weakness or loss, and not seeing gains in the gym, elevated blood glucose or insulin resistance, because it's just so acutely tied to our ability to use and need for glucose.
I mean, which all sounds related to the same. Could this be in the same category of like, imbalanced hormones or whatever,
Of
thyroid or
course.
all these
Yeah,
other, okay.
yeah. Because cortisol
Hmm.
also impacts on thyroid function. And also, what I was saying with progesterone, it impacts on the level of progesterone that is circulating around the body or produced, even because they have the same, um, they're made from the same precursor or raw material. And there's just a priority list in the body. And because cortisol is related to our survival, your body will prioritize making cortisol over progesterone.
So if you were to like again, I know talking about like the top down most important, but if you were to like regulate your cortisol, would it be as important to regulate your hormone? Like if you're like, I can definitely I can regulate my cortisol levels, would you need to be as focused on your hormones if you're regulating your cortisol?
I think because so much of cortisol, of the symptoms related to cortisol, it's stress related, right? And so if there's a real focus on stress management, getting sleep, eating like proper amounts of food in a routine fashion, protein centric, carbohydrate that helps support the central nervous system. If you're focused on maybe meditation, if you're always training, like so overtraining, if you like pare that back, if you do what we were chatting about last week with, reach out to friends and have these supportive relationships, these will all help improve cortisol regulation.
Function in the
And
body. Hmm.
yeah, yeah, which will then offload that the need for all of the precursor to go towards cortisol. So progesterone levels will come up. They'll have more of a balance with estrogen and progesterone because progesterone levels will be higher. So there's a term people use called estrogen dominance, and I don't love it.
Yes, I hear this all the time. What is that?
Yeah, it's basically just how much estrogen you have relative to progesterone, but it's not a dominance per se. And equally, when you then allow your body to produce more progesterone, then you'll have less of a gap between the two, and so you'll have less of these symptoms of high estrogen because often those symptoms are actually related to relative to progesterone anyway. So all of these
And if
things,
your cortisol
which
is regulated, then your progesterone is going to be regulated, and that's going to help your estrogen.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it absolutely can. So it's all interrelated, and this is why looking at hormones or looking at cortisol, it's just you can't look at them all in isolation because you just miss things. Because if you look at something in isolation and just try to fix this one thing, if you're thinking about hormones, then like everything works together. Of course, if you step back and go, I need to address my cortisol, and actually I need to, it's a behavior change thing that needs to happen. And so, what are the behaviors that help this? Those same behaviors will then help with the regulation of everything else. So, yeah,
I think sometimes in a place to try to centralize the information, because it's just, again, I know there's ways to test your hormones and the whole thing, but like
yeah,
cortisol seems almost like an animal that you could have a little bit more control over, if you will. Like you could, that goes back to like being really mindful about your sleep and your eating and your connection to somebody who can help lower your like your stress levels and
yeah,
your exercise. It's like doing those things kind of like simultaneously will help lower this thing. And I know that they're all interconnected, but it does kind of seem like that's a fairly giant piece of the puzzle, is regulation of your cortisol levels, which will help these other things that, and I'm not saying, I mean, we could talk more about hormones, but there's something really elusive about like the conversation around hormones, because it's just like, blah, like a little bit here and then
I
pull that one
know.
back. And then it feels like a never ending science experiment. But cortisol seems, after this discussion, seems a little bit more easy to understand, I guess.
And I guess it just comes down to stress management because it's all about stress on the body.
That's what it seems
And
like.
and then so if you can make changes to the stress load, then you'll make changes to your stress response.
That is so good.
Mm.
Say that again.
What did I say? If you make
If you make
changes to your
changes to your stress
stress,
load,
you
then
make
you'll
changes to your
just to your
stress
stress
response.
response.
Yeah.
It's really good. You need
Yeah.
to write that down. that's going to be our thing at the end of the Strength Renewed on this one. Well, it has been completely eye opening because it was,
Awesome.
kind of in the same way we were talking about, you know, when we just kind of did an actual deep dive into muscle, it was like you allowed me to kind of use these ways, and I've been explaining it ever since. Like, muscle acts like a blocker and a barrier, right? Like it's a barrier to help regulate blood sugar, and it's a blocker to help protect your muscle or your bone. And it's logical when you think about it like that. Of course, it is completely so much more complicated than that, but at least simply put, that's what it's doing. So when you think about the importance of having it, and it's the same kind of thing with cortisol, like I thought it was just all bad, what I
I
mean, going in, I
know.
was like,
Yeah.
oh God, you're going to do the huge thing. And really, I think simply put, is that it isn't actually, it's the chronicness of it. Like if you're in a chronic state of high cortisol levels, it is dangerous for your body. But the intermittentness of it is just kind of the natural ebb and flow of what
Yeah.
your body is experiencing. And so the more that you can put things in place to help regulate amounts of cortisol in the body, that healthier and better you're going to feel, and that in tune will help balance your hormone levels too.
Totally. And it just demystifies it. Like, because
Yes, demystifies it is such a big thing. I'm telling you, you can't do this like habit stacking, like we talked about. You cannot create habits if you are confused by the habits you're creating. I think you're
and
seriously.
and I think as well, like like it's it's not hard. It isn't like these things we're talking about. They are simple. They're not easy, but they're simple things. And so if it allows you to understand it better, with some of the emotional hijacking that happens, the way that I saw you talk about cortisol,
Definitely.
like then suddenly you get this blind panic and you can't do anything. But if you
I'm
understand,
emotionally hijacked all like that's a thing I work on every single day, Mix,
yeah, I
is
know,
not being emotionally hijacked.
yeah,
Literally.
yeah,
But I'm
and
aware of it and I'm working
yeah,
on it. But
totally.
oh
And you're
my
asking the
God.
right questions, like, tell me why all
Hmm.
cortisol is bad and we need to remove it. And I'm like, okay, it's a really interesting perspective because that's not actually what's happening. And so
Yeah.
if you keep asking the questions and then we're able to chat about it, that just alleviates, dare I say it, the chronic cortisol elevation that occurs when you think about cortisol.
Well, you nailed it. And that also goes back to what we were talking about last week. When you have a connection to another person, or you're doing just by the nature of that, you're reducing it. So you must think about it in a bigger way. It's not just
Yeah,
like a box where I have to see this friend because I haven't seen them for a long time. I'm actually going to meet with this person because my cortisol levels will be lower, and in turn, my hormones will be more balanced, and I'll just be healthier. You know what I mean? Like that's how
totally.
you have to start kind of like thinking about it. But I love
Yeah,
how we did demystify actual cortisol. It's
yeah,
intermittently is what it's just a natural part of existence. But when we're just in this constant elevated state of it, it's quite dangerous for the body and not healthy. But you can
no,
have
yeah,
some pretty intense control and say over it. And I think, going back to what you're eating and who you're talking with and how much information you're consuming, and taking a moment to just also
mm,
like step back and sort of be quiet, for a moment too. That there's real
100%.
power in that. That does seem to be. I'd be curious to know, out of all those things, if they were to like put me under like a little like a scale, like a
Mm.
range, or like the red or the lights flashing over me. Out of all those things that we talked about as possible ways of regulating cortisol, which one would be the greatest cortisol regulator?
Mm-hmm.
Just a question. I don't know.
Nice one. Yeah. It's a rhetorical one, right?
Yes, it's a rhetorical one, and I just wonder from my own body, like what would be literally just kind of like the thing that maybe it's subconscious. You know what I mean? Of what is creating the
Maybe.
most stress in the body. I'm just me,
Yeah.
deep dive a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
in there
Yeah,
and
totally.
figure
And
it
only
out.
you can answer that. And it's so
Yeah,
individual, right?
yeah,
Yeah. And that's why, when you understand your anchor behaviors, which what are the things that really ground you, they're the big pillars. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Nice
What are
one.
your quick two anchor behaviors?
Oh, well, exercise and diet.
What are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for, I'll be seeing my husband in about 23 minutes and he's bringing home dishwashing liquid, which is great because we need it. That's
Spoken like a
where I'm at.
true. That's a real relationship right there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. How
it
about
means
you,
you
Jess?
didn't have to go get the soap.
Exactly.
Um, I am grateful for you. I'm grateful for Shrink Renewed because it brings a lot to my life, and I love that. And I'm glad that it brings a lot to other people's lives too. So I feel really grateful for it.
Yeah,
I'm also
nice.
really grateful for, I got to see one of my best friends in the whole wide world, and I love her so much. And it was funny because it wasn't exactly how she's in town visiting. She's from the East Coast, and it's our spring break here. And I didn't. It wasn't exactly how I was hoping I would see her. I thought we'd have like a little coffee date or a little glass of wine together or a walk. Just the two of us, but it just didn't go anything like that. And it was all of our families, and the kids were running amok, and it's rained, and we wanted to go for a walk. And so we ended up going to her family's house. And it was like, we like poured hot cups of tea, made a little beeline to the living room. The kids had a grand old time playing in the room above. And I was thinking to myself that if we continue to do this as a practice, to keep walking into spaces where we might hope it looks a certain way, or it should be this way, or whatever, and you just kind of let it be the way, it's really freeing, like,
Yeah.
and I just entered in because I did kind of want it to be a different way. I'm not going to lie, but I went in and it was just like super open and couldn't have been a more recharging visit. Cortisol
Lovely.
levels felt lower. And it was just so nice to connect. And you just realize like your people are your people. And no matter how many times or how you see them, they give you something really powerful. And then you share it with you, and you share it with everybody around you. And so I'm grateful for that practice that I'm working on. And I'm also grateful for friendships and people in your life that just really allow you to feel seen,
Nice one,
just for
Jess.
exactly as you are, all of your
Yeah.
ridiculous imperfections and
Yeah.
silliness. So that is it. And that's one of my pillars too.
Yeah,
So
nice.
nutrition and strength training and gratitude. So
Yeah.
it's a real practice for me. So
Yeah. I love it.
good luck at your
Awesome,
run, my girl.
Jess.
You're running. You got Boston coming up, right?
Yeah,
So you've got your
Boston. Yeah, that's
marathon
still yeah, a couple of weeks away.
a couple weeks away, but we're working toward it. So
Working toward it.
we'll keep going. We'll talk about it
Yeah,
on the next
yeah,
one. I'm
yeah,
excited. That's a big
absolutely.
deal. Boston
I know it
Marathon.
is. I know. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. All
I
right,
know, it's so
Jess.
cool.
Yeah. See you.
Bye. I'll see you on the flip.